Hey, it's Marley. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going through a list of the most influential books in my life. It's coming up on my 29th birthday, so I thought this was a good time to reflect on which books have had the biggest impact on me and my reading and my life. I made a list of like 32 books or book series. I'm just gonna go as long as I feel like going. I might not name all of the 32 books, but I'm gonna kind of go chronologically throughout my reading journey and we'll see how far we get. So the first book series I put down as being really influential for my life was The Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I remember reading this in elementary school, and I do think I was always interested in reading, but this is the first series I actually got truly obsessed with. I remember just binge reading these books and feeling so proud of how fast I was reading. Looking back, I don't think they were that long of books because they are books for children, but they were just books I got so passionate about. I kept thinking about this world and these characters even when I was done reading. I was interested in reading like the extra novels that came with it, like the Beatrice letters. So yeah, this was a really impactful book series for me, as I know it was for a lot of others. I think I was kind of attracted to the darkness that this book series had. Obviously, there's a lot of sad, serious stuff that happens in this series, hence the title. So yeah, that's the first one. The next book series is going to be the Chronicles of Narnia. This was like my Harry Potter because I never grew up reading the Harry Potter books. I only watched the movies. So this was a series I just really was interested in. I read the first couple books in school, for school, and then went ahead and read the rest of the books on my own. And I was really invested and excited about the movie series. I loved those movies. Edmund was one of my first crushes. I just really loved this fantasy series. So this also made me interested in like British people and British culture. Again, as I said, this was my Harry Potter. Next up, of course, I have to mention the Twilight Saga by Stephenie Meyer. This should have been number one, I guess, but I'm trying to kind of go chronologically, but this just had a huge impact on me as a seventh grader up until however old. Yeah, so obviously I liked reading before this series, but this is where I got literally obsessed with reading. And this was obviously my introduction to more like paranormal books, obviously vampire books. And then we had the huge splurge of other, werewolf books, fairies, all that kind of stuff. So this really started that for me, along with so many other people. I was Team Jacob. Unpopular opinion, I would make fan videos about the movies and reread the books, and I'm not a huge rereader, so that really shows something. So yeah, this was a very impactful series for me. I was definitely in that age group, in that demographic of like preteen, teenager that just really was affected by this series. Next up, it might not be surprising to hear that Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell also definitely had a big effect on me because I was such a kind of bookish person, very shy, didn't have a ton of friends. Seeing that type of character reflected in a book felt very special to me. In this book, we're following Kath going away to her first year of university, and she's really shy and she's really struggling to make friends, and she's obsessed with her favorite fandom, which is called Simon Snow, and she writes fan fiction about it. While I didn't write fan fiction, I did make fan videos, as I mentioned, so I just felt like Kath was such a relatable character that is really nice for me to see. And she ends up getting a romance in this book with Levi, so that was really fun. And these two, their love story will always have a special place in my heart. The name Fangirl, like obviously this just really reflected my life and how I was feeling when I was a teenager. Another book I'm going to mention is going to be The Host by Stephenie Meyer. This is obviously her other book that got pretty popular apart from Twilight. It has to do with aliens, and it has to do with kind of a love triangle again, but more of like a quadruple love triangle. But the reason this had such a big impact on me was the ending and kind of the emotional scenes that happen at the end. I don't want to like reveal what happens, but there were some really emotional scenes between the main couple in this book, and I remember it inspired me to write my first little story or little chapters. I just thought it was so moving to see like this couple going through something so sad and heartbreaking that I just wanted to like emulate that and also do my own version of it. So I feel like this book kind of inspired me to start writing, even though I have not really been focusing on that lately. I've not written anything in a long time. I feel like this was the first thing to really inspire me to do that. Next up, I'm gonna say the Inkheart trilogy by Cornelia Funke. This also got turned into a movie, which I think is why it was kind of being promoted more and came across my desk, so to speak. I don't really have anything too specific to say about this. This is a fantasy series, and it is about people who have the ability to read out loud, and then books come out of the pages, and characters or real people can also go into books as well. So it's not like this was my introduction to fantasy at this point or anything, but it was just a series I got really obsessed with, really connected with. I imagine I probably loved the idea of going into your favorite book at this time in my life. I think a lot of us readers read to escape, so that was just a perfect story. And some of these characters were like some of my first book characters that I really connected so much with, like Dustfinger. I absolutely loved him. So yeah, I just wanted to shout out this series. All right, another one that might be the same for a lot of people is Percy Jackson and the Olympians. So the first book being The Lightning Thief. I picked this series up when I was in 8th grade, and I just loved this series. And as you can see from my shelf behind me, I've continued to read all of the books in this world and by Riordan. I feel like these books introduced me to Greek mythology. I know a lot of people learned about Greek mythology in school, but I don't think I did. I went to a Catholic school, so maybe that's why. But it was really interesting to read about the Greek gods, and in such a humorous way. I feel like this series is quite unique, or it was unique at the time of publishing. You know, I wasn't reading a lot of male point of views. I wasn't reading a ton of like action-y type of books or like funny books. So yeah, I really enjoyed this series as well. I definitely think it influenced me. All right, this, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with Twilight a bit, but I wanted to shout out the House of Night series by Kristen and PC Cast. This was one of the many books that came out that had to do with vampires after Twilight happened and the popularity, but it was one that had so many books come out, and I read every single one. I bought every single one. I think when I hear other people talk about these books in this series, they kind of say they trailed off, they just read the first couple. I read every single one and I just loved it. I remember picturing the story in my head and picturing it as a TV show, because it kind of is set up like a TV show with having so many different characters that you are following and so much different drama and relationships between people. It takes place at a school for vampires, so it was just so fun. Looking back, or even I remember at the time thinking the writing was not really great, but yeah, I just feel like this took up so much of my reading time when I was younger, so I wanted to mention this one too. Let me know if you guys read this one. Okay, another book still from my teenage years is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. As you can see from all of the other books I have talked about so far, I think they're all basically fantasy, paranormal in some way. That's really what I was drawn to as a reader when I was, 12, 13, 14, whatever. But I remember picking up The Fault in Our Stars by John Green because it was getting hyped up. I think the movie was coming out soon, and I read it literally in one day. And so this was probably one of the first books I really read that had to do with real people and real teenagers going through real problems. I remember it was the day before, it might have been the day before I started high school, or before I started a certain year in high school. And I think because I was so anxious, I just totally got sucked into this story, this book, to distract me from my stress of that. And then obviously I went on to read all the rest of John Green's books and enjoy them. Again, kind of opening myself to reading about different things, different perspectives, male point of views, that kind of thing. So this definitely changed the game for reading for us teens back then. All right, a book more specific to me, I think, is going to be this Dark Secret series by Elizabeth Chandler. She was also the author of Kissed by an Angel, which I think was her more popular book. But this is kind of like a not thriller, but mystery series. I think two different stories are in this book, and they're both two different like murder mysteries, and I remember just getting so sucked into them. And these were probably some of my first exposures to murder mysteries, which obviously if you watch my channel now, you know I'm a big fan of thrillers and mysteries. So I feel like this really introduced me to it. I remember getting a little scared reading it, but I remember always having a ship in the books as well, like a couple that I really was rooting for too. So it was a good balance of multiple different elements that I was enjoying. So then I want to mention Confessions of Georgia Nicolson. I think that's the title of the series, but Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging was like the first book by Louise Rennison, and of course it did have that movie adaptation as well. This series, I think there's like 10 books in the series. It is a British teenage girl, and she's basically just writing in her diary. That's like the way the books are written, is that she's making these diary entries talking about, you know, starting to like boys, starting to kiss boys and date them, and different drama with her friends. As you can see, I wasn't reading like a ton of those types of books. It was also quite comedic. So this was a really interesting book series for me, and it also exposed me to a lot of British terms, British culture. These books never got like translated or whatever to, you know, American language. They always were still written in the English way. And so there are a lot of slang terms, and I learned a lot, and again, just continued to get more interested in like British culture. So I really enjoyed this series when I was younger. Of course, I have to mention The Mortal Instruments, aka City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. This became one of my most favorite series of all time. It's definitely, well, you can see my shelf behind me. I continue to love Cassandra Clare's books and read every single book and always love them. So this was the start. I remember being so obsessed with Jason Clary. That was maybe one of my first like book couples I got so obsessed with, because even when I read Twilight, I mean, I don't necessarily think I loved Bella and Edward together, since I was Team Jacob, but I just loved that series overall. But for this, I actually shipped Clary with Jace, which was new for me, because in all of these other love triangle books, I always shipped her with the other guy, the underdog. And in this one, I finally shipped her with like who I was supposed to. And obviously there's the big twist, the sibling twist. That was crazy at the time if you were there. So yeah, this was just a really impactful series. It was great to see how Cassandra Clare had so many different like mystical creatures in her books, not just vampires, but she had werewolves, she had fairies, she obviously had angels and demons and all that. So love this series to this day. Another kind of author I want to shout out is Jodi Picoult, if that's how you say her name, particularly the book The 10th Circle and her book The Pact. These are two books that my mom actually was reading, because they are adult books, but they're, I think, some of the first adult books that I actually picked up myself because they were in my house. I was able to get through them, even though they didn't have to do with vampires or any teenage drama or anything like that. They're very serious books, always having to do with a court case, having to do with a murder or something very, very serious. And so I think this was really interesting for me to be reading these books at age, you know, 14 or whatever it was, not an adult. I think it exposed me to some different topics, maybe some things I shouldn't have been reading at the time, but I think it led to me learning different things about the world, leading to conversations with my mom if I asked her about like, what does this mean, that kind of thing. So yeah, shout out to Jodi. Now, to go along with that, I also was picking up the Dan Brown books from my mom's shelf. So Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code. Again, I read these, I think, in like 8th grade. So a little bit younger than when you typically read these. These definitely had a big impact on me as well, opening myself up and my reading taste up. These are like mystery books, but also thrillers, have to do with history and symbolicism. Is that a word? So I feel like it was good for me to read that. Like, it has a main character traveling all over the world, as I said, dealing with history and religion and all these kind of topics. So I feel like that was good for me to be exposing myself to that as well, along with all the fantasy stuff. Going back to more of a typical answer, we are on number 15, so making good time, I guess. I'm gonna mention The Hunger Games, of course, by Suzanne Collins. I read this, of course, when it was getting popular, saw all the movies, of course, and just loved the series like everyone else. I think it was, again, good for me to be reading YA books that actually had something to say, and they weren't just about the romance and the love triangle and the silly little drama, vampires and whatever. Like, this was dealing with some really interesting themes and topics, important and very relevant themes that are still relevant today. So don't need to harp on this one too much, because I'm sure sure everyone around my age would mention this in their lists. But yeah, of course we have The Hunger Games. Then I want to mention The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I did own this book at one point, but I think my sister borrowed it and it has been lost. But The Hate You Give was a YA book, and it did have to do with a young black boy who was shot by a police officer when he was just literally not doing anything wrong. He just was reaching for his phone or something like that. So I feel like this was the first book I read that actually had a more like diverse perspective, which you can probably tell by the other books that I've mentioned so far. They haven't really had that. So I think this was really good for me to read. I probably read this again in high school. I think that's when it was popular, but definitely one of the first books that actually, you know, explored racism, explored more diverse topics than what I had been reading. And I think this really changed publishing a lot in general. Again, just like something like Twilight did and Hunger Games did, how they really affected the publishing industry. I think The Hate You Give was the start of more diverse stories. Now we're finally going to get into a little bit more of recent years. I do have to mention Colleen Hoover. I know she's a problematic topic and author, but after university, when I started working full-time, I hadn't really been reading much. When I started working my full-time job, commuting every day, I would just binge read Colleen Hoover's books back to back to back on my commutes. It really got me back into reading. Say what you want about her books, they are addictive and they are very entertaining. And obviously I am someone who's a fan of kind of plot twists and mysteries. And while her books are technically romance, I always really liked her plot twists that she had in her books and the crazy kind of unrealistic drama that she would have. Some of her books I do like for more reasons than that. But yeah, for the most part, I'm not reading her books for the romance. I'm reading them for the drama and for the twists. These books definitely got me back into reading in like 2019, so I'll always be grateful for that. A similar book series actually at the same time that I was reading was the Arc of a Scythe series by Neal Schusterman. Again, read it around the same time. It reawakened my love for reading and my love for reading YA literature, YA dystopian literature, kind of similar to a Hunger Games kind of situation. If you are into Hunger Games and dystopian books, definitely want to recommend this series. It literally is an award winner apparently. I'm definitely thankful for these books as well to just kind of get me back into reading during that time. Another series I'm going to mention is the Promised Neverland manga series. I have a friend who really has encouraged me to read more manga, and I don't make a ton of time for it, but this is a series I borrowed from her that I actually got quite into. I really enjoyed the series. I've read every volume and I just had such a good time. It is, I don't even know what genre to say. It's about these kids. It is like a drama, thriller, horror, I think it gets called, fantasy. It has all these different genres that I'm very, very interested in. That's just something I tend to enjoy in manga. I've learned I don't really like the cutesy romance ones. I like these kind of action horror ones. So if you're into that too, I would recommend. It's a great kind of way to get into manga if you haven't read it yet. I think the 20th book I'm on now is going to be A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I just had to mention this because I feel like it's such a staple in my reading and one of my favorite books. Even though it's a young adult book, I did read it as an adult, as that's when it came out, maybe in 2019 or 2020 or something. This just kind of started my love of YA thrillers and kind of just thrillers in general. Obviously I had that interest in it when I was younger with the Dark Secret series that I showed, but again, this just kind of got me back into reading these kinds of books. I think I read it in just one day. So again, it's just another one of those books that helped me get back into reading, and I continue to enjoy every one of Holly Jackson's releases. Apparently not all of them are popular with everyone, but I give them all 5 stars. There's something about her writing that really connects with me, and so I'm happy about that. All right, I think I'm going to end the video here at the top 20 books that have influenced my life. I still have more, so maybe I'll do a part 2 to this video sometime in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have made it all the way through, be sure to let me know one of the book series or books that's been really influential for your life, and if we have any that were in common. If you're not subscribed already, please do down below, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you soon in my next video coming pretty soon. Bye.